Hey everyone. Hey Chris, how you doing? This is Mark Patton, also known as Jesse Walsh, and you're watching Behind the Reel, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Hey guys, welcome to Behind the Reel. Today we're going to be looking at A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. Often referred to as one of the gayest horror movies ever made, but at the same time one of the darkest portrayals of Freddy Krueger I have ever seen. But we'll get to that. Freddy's Revenge to me is a film that has definitely gained a second wind over the years and almost renaissanced in a way. It's completely different to its predecessor and the Elm Street films that came after it, but that's what I love about it. The film does its own thing whilst also showcasing the darkest and meanest version of Freddy put to screen. Accompanied with an updated look of Kroogs from a young and upcoming makeup artist that would go on to create another well-known slasher. So November 9th, 1984, Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street hits theaters and is a smashing success, saving New Line Cinema from near bankruptcy and giving New Line founder Bob Shaye a bona fide franchise potential with his latest horror slasher, Fred Krueger. Days after the film's release, the head of distribution over at New Line walks into Bob Shaye's office and says, "Bob, buddy, pal, we need a sequel." Bob replies, "Absolutely, but we're still stingy with cash, so we won't be hiring Robert Englund back as Freddy. We'll just use a double instead." Okay. So off the New Line crew went, with optioning a script from writer David Chaskin, who thought it would be fun for Freddy to have a human vessel in the form of Jesse that could potentially bring Krueger into the real world. Chaskin went on to say in regards to the gay undertones that there were indeed hints of subtext sprinkled in the characterization of Jesse. It was the mid-80s, and being gay wasn't exactly how it is today. There was a lot of fear and shame within a lot of people and the community, and with Freddy feeding on fear, Chaskin thought it was the perfect pairing. Robert Shaye offered Wes Craven the chance to direct again, but he turned down the offer since he had many problems with the script, such as the quote-unquote possessed parakeet that seemed very ridiculous to him, and one of Freddy merging with the main character and manifesting in real life at the pool party to kill scores of teenagers, of which many are bigger than Krueger himself, which Craven thought would diminish Freddy's scare factor as Robert Englund is not very tall in stature, standing in at 5'9". New Line enlisted director Jack Sholder, who had worked with New Line before directing Alone in the Dark and had also done some editing for them on the side. Sholder had stated he basically really didn't give a rat's ass about the first Elm Street film and was just there to do the work and get a paycheck. In the lead role, we have Mark Patton playing Jesse Walsh, and a big thank you to Mark for doing that intro. Mark has been a dear friend for nearly 10 years now and also been a wonderful supporter of what I do, and it just meant the world for him to do this. And if you haven't, I highly recommend checking out Mark's doco called Scream Queen: My Nightmare on Elm Street. It revolves around Mark's life post Elm Street and how it affected his mental and physical health. It's a pretty confronting watch, but a must watch at that. And at the time of filming in 1985, Mark was a closeted gay man. Unfortunately, a pretty common thing back then. But he didn't let it deter him, as I think Mark gives a pretty damn well-rounded performance, hitting a lot of emotional beats whilst at the same time portraying a kid who's not sure what's going on within himself. And it's kind of an interesting parallel with the gay undertones, if you ask me. Nightmare 2's cast is a pretty mixed but fun bag. We have Kim Myers as Lisa, who is a bloody spitting image of Meryl Streep. Now, this was her first role, and talk about being thrown in the deep end. I mean, you've got lots of heavy effects as well as a sex scene, and for her first time on film, she's great. We've got Robert Russler as Ron Grady, and I love the way Ron was written, because he's clearly a jock, but he means well. Playing Jesse's parents, we've got legendary actors Clu Gulager and Hope Lang. And as far as parents in horror films go, I think these two are up there as the most well-rounded and caring. They're not just hitting one note and being oblivious to their kids' problems. They actually give a shit. And Mr. Walsh at one point breaking down at the sight of his son's downward spiral. The film kicks off with a long shot of a school bus cruising down the street driven by none other than Robert Englund. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that initially they didn't hire Robert Englund back to play Freddy. And we will get to that later. We're introduced to a very awkward Jesse Walsh, and look how protective this bloke is over his boombox. Composing Freddy's Revenge is Christopher Young in place of Charles Bernstein. Young said he drew a lot of inspiration from humpback whale vocals for his scoring of the film. Killer! As the bus travels along, wait, that's not Robert Englund. Oh fuck, who cares? The bus starts to speed up and takes a detour through the desert. We see an outline of a fedora and a gnarly looking grill on the bus. as Jesse and two remaining girls are at the mercy of bus driver Fred, with a body glove sticker. Okay, also, why is Freddy wearing grandpa shoes? I'm serious, look at these bad boys. 100% he's taken Jenny to the prom, followed by a milkshake at the local milk bar. Now take a look at the glove that Krug's is sporting. This is indeed the same glove from Elm Street 1, though it has indeed gone through the ringer as a result and has shifted in terms of appearance. Take for example, the copper finger stalls have dulled to a more caramel color, the brass backplate has lost a lot of its charring, the blades have been dulled and scratched, whilst the leather glove has had its ball ripped off. In fact, if you look at some promo pics and screenshots from the film, you can see some of the ringlets were actually removed and replaced with wire. The hero glove now resides in the Museum of Pop Culture in Seattle, along with a screen-used sweater from the first film. Now, of course, it'd be rude not to talk about this beautiful glove that I'm sporting. This is actually made by my dear friend Christian Karlsson, who is based in Sweden, and he has Glove Love Sweden. Now, this is a beautiful representation of the Part 2 glove. He has emulated all of these beautiful details that the hero glove sports in Freddy's Revenge, including that nice caramel copper pipe. Finger stalls also got the blunted and brutalized blades. Just the leather glove is just so nice and soft. Everything is just a perfect representation of the prop. Even the different size rivets, because some of the rivets were switched out between Elm Street 1 and Elm Street 2, most notably also the index finger stall. A massive thank you to Christian for delivering such a beautiful piece of art. Anyway, back to Tour Bus Freddy. The bus eventually comes to a stop where we see some awesome miniature work with the vehicle teetering on top of a large rock spike, accompanied with some badass 80s rotoscoping lighting. Miss Frizzle then starts to stalk Jesse and the girl, slicing the bus seats before taking a swipe and boom, tomatoes. Jesse awakes from his nightmare, drenched in sweat. A recurring theme throughout this film. Here we're introduced to the rest of the Walsh family, who have just moved into 1428 Elm Street, 5 years after the events of Elm Street 1. And props to Clu Gulager for the best deadpan face. Also, Cole Rhonda. Now, I don't know about you guys, but whilst Jesse's little sister is demonstrating some lovely foreshadowing, what in Fred Nation is that serial name? No. We're then introduced to Lisa Paletti, who hitches a ride with Jesse in his shitbox car that dead set was like my first car. Jesse may have had the deadly dinosaur, but I had the mighty Magna. Now, this may look like any ordinary establishing shot, but this gives us our first insight to the name of the town that Elm Street is in. We never knew of Springwood in the first Elm Street. I mean, the setting was always in Ohio. Totally not LA. But now we have a name of the town. Anyway, carry on. During sport practice, we're introduced to rowdy Ron Grady. Ron ends up smacking Jesse in the face with a ball before getting into a dacking competition. The cheeky fight is then broken up by Coach Schneider, played by hard-ass Marshall Bell, who has a dirty little secret that we'll get to later. Schneider makes the boys do push-ups until he relieves them of duty. We then get a massive exposition dump from Ron, who tells Jesse that the house he's moved into was where a mother locked her daughter inside, where she then went insane after seeing her boyfriend get butchered by a maniac across the street. I'm sorry, but this just comes off as lazy writing. Like, wouldn't the events of Elm Street 1 be a lot more present in the town of Springwood? And Grady kind of just brushes it off like it's an urban legend. Later that night, we see the front door of 1428, now rocking a red door, as opposed to in Elm Street 1 where it had a blue door. Jesse is tossing and turning, waking up in a sweat. He goes downstairs to get a drink that's clearly been dropped straight down by a stagehand. As Jesse goes to grab some paper towel, he spots a peeping Tom bush Fred outside. He then goes outside to inspect what's going on before seeing a furnace Fred now downstairs in his basement grabbing something out of a lit furnace. As Jesse tries to inspect the basement, he sees a shadow walking towards the stairs where Fred once burned in Elm Street 1. Jesse starts playing door tag before being confronted by the Fred man himself with a brand new look. Now, this particular makeup was done by a then 23-year-old Kevin Yeager, who replaced David Miller from the first Elm Street. Now, Yeager went on to say he drew inspiration from witches, giving Freddy a hook nose and a more skeletal facial structure. In recent years, Yeager actually broke the original molds out of storage and made some prosthetics out of silicone, as opposed to foam latex from Elm Street 2, and attached them, glued them, and painted them on a bust of Robert Englund. Pretty damn cool. His sweater is now rocking the trademark green stripes on the sleeves, and to this day, no one knows why they made the change. A new fedora that was originally made from a cowboy hat, the same glove from Elm Street 1 that we spoke about, and grandpa shoes. Okay. Yeager also added red contact lenses to make him more demonic as well as more pitched down in terms of his voice.
You've got the body.
The result is a much more darker and meaner Freddy, and in my opinion, goes down as Robert Englund's best turn as Krueger, right next to his performance from part 1. And this particular scene, Freddy was originally supposed to stick the index blade of his glove in Mark Patton's mouth, almost in an erotic way. But Mark was like, dude, no. After Freddy demonstrates he's not just a pretty face but all brains, Jesse wakes up in a sweat, realizing it was all a dream. Or was it? Oh, I don't fucking know. The next day at school, Jesse falls asleep in biology, headed by hands down the creepiest looking teacher I have ever seen. Grady proceeds to slap a snake on Jesse, is that euphemism? Resulting in a good old fashioned flip of the bird. Also, I love the way the teacher grabs this snake. Now, fucking hell, what do Lisa's parents do for work? So as Jesse goes to see Lisa, he's sent back to his room to finish unpacking, leading to one of the cringiest dance scenes in movie history. Poor Mark Patton dreaded filming this scene, and he told director Jack Shoulder, just roll film, let me go for it, resulting in this. Jesse's mum and Lisa barge in, and this leads us to Lisa finding Nancy's old diary. These kids must be fucking psychic, being able to read words when they're not even on the page. Mind-blowing. Later that night, Jesse wakes up to find all of his belongings are now reduced to puddles of gloopy goodness, sending him downstairs to investigate the furnace. But instead of finding flames, Jesse finds Freddy's glove wrapped up in a soiled rag. The furnace ignites before Jesse is met with a casual Krueger, prompting Jesse to try on his handy get-it-work for size. Jesse refuses and Krug's fucks right off before leaving his high school shop project next to him. The next day at school, which is also the same location used for the Karate Kid, Lisa asks Jesse to borrow the diary to do a bit more Freddy Krueger investigating. Jesse and Grady smash some laps with a banger of a comeback from Grady.
You remember your dreams? Only the wet ones.
A good old shit-talking session about Schneider lands the boys back doing push-ups, clearly reusing the same footage from the previous push-up session. Cheeky bastards. Later that night, the Walshes are trying to stay cool when one of their peach faces freaks the fuck out, killing its roomie and attacking the family. Now, originally there was supposed to be a much more larger, demonic-looking puppet of the bird created by effects artist Rick Lazzarini that ultimately wasn't used. The bird eventually shits itself and explodes with very hyper-realistic state-of-the-art puppet right there. After a fight with Papa Bear claiming that his son blew the bird up, Jesse storms off, but later that night he's awoken by yet again some intense heat. Jesse gets kitted up and makes his way downstairs. By the way, Zach called. He gets spooked by a fine china light show and heads to a leather S&M bar called Don's Place, where we see New Line founder and producer Bob Shea all decked out in a nice leather ensemble. And Shea went on to say that he picked out his own costume at a place called the Pleasure Chest in LA, accompanied by his daughters. As Jesse goes to have a sip of his bud, he's stopped by his other bud, Coach Schneider, who brings him back to school to make him run laps in the middle of the night. It's just, what the fuck? So this part always creeps me out. The coach getting out some jump rope whilst Jesse showers, is he preparing to... Ew. As Schneider's about to get his rocks off, Freddy starts popping balls off in Schneider's face, which... Alright, and ends up using the rope to drag him into the showers where Jesse is. And after being stripped, he's whipped with some towels, clearly for initiation into Alpha Beta Krueger Kappa Kappa. We then see a goofy looking Freddy emerge from the steam. Now this is where we need to touch on the fact that this is not Robert Englund. It's a double, who the crew were initially going to use for the entirety of shooting, as apparently Robert's agent was asking way too much money after the success of Elm Street 1. Bob Shea thought, fuck it, he's just a bloke in a mask, so we can just use a random stand-in. And this shot alone is why they hired Robert Englund for the rest of the shoot. Englund made Freddy his own, and the film would have ultimately suffered even more without him. The coach ends up getting a nice slash back from Goofy Krug's, who's actually played by makeup artist Kevin Yeager, as he knew exactly where to hit the mark on the giant back prosthetic glued down to Marshall Bell. When the steam clears, Jesse is left naked with a complimentary glove on his hand, which just screams fabulous. Now, when you think about it, this is technically the first time we see Freddy actually physically kill someone with his glove, as opposed to being invisible. After Jesse is brought home by the police and his dad has a bit of a mini meltdown, Papa Clue slaps some bars back on 1428, which wouldn't be the first time. At school, Grady tells Jesse and Lisa that the coach was sliced up in the showers, prompting Jesse to quietly poop himself. That night we're treated to a continuity error with the bars not back on the house, but yet again another sweaty sleep session, bulging undies, and a complimentary draw glove. Jesse heads out into his sister's room and Jesus Christ, that is horrifying. The next morning, Jesse confronts Papa Klug about the history of Krug in the house and what happened all those years ago, prompting Mama Walsh and Sis to freak out. Before they can get into a heated argument, the toaster decides it's had enough and kicks off the heated part, showcasing its magic skills of not even being plugged in. And after going through Nancy's diary, Lisa takes Jesse to an old power plant where Freddy used to take his young victims and kill them. The Casa steel mill was located in LA with the exception of the water tower. Now, the portion of the mill where the movie was shot was demolished in the mid-90s, and the California Speedway now stands in its place. However, part of the original mill is still in operation just south of the Speedway. Now, the outward scenes for Mortal Kombat, as well as the ending of Terminator 2 Judgment Day, were also filmed at the Casa Steel Mill. I have a thing for old factories and mills. I would have shit myself with excitement seeing this in person. It's massive, look at it. Jesse senses something and heads towards an old storage unit. He opens it up and finds Splinter, who's lost 4 baby turtles. We then cut to a POV Steadicam shot that ends in Sister Walsh's room with a sweaty Jesse looking over her, tucking her back in with a killer right hand. Now, fun fact, when I was making Freddy gloves back in high school, that was my business name. Alright, I'm no mathematician, but there's no fucking way you're fitting 250 pills in that bad boy. After Jesse goes all emo on his parents, his lady squeeze, and then spitting the dummy at Granny pushing Grady, it's time to head to Lisa's pool party, headed by Papa Poletti. These are the oldest looking high schoolers I have seen on film. I just feel this was the crew on a Saturday night and Jack Shold was like, just start the camera, they won't know. Jesse, being the party pooper, retreats to the cabana where Lisa follows him inside and they get stuck into one another. Jesse then showcasing his Gene Simmons tongue that was built by effects artist Mark Shostrom. Shostrom said in an interview that Mark Patton hated the rig as it caused him to drool as he kept the foam latex piece in his mouth for long periods of time. After Jesse bails on Lisa, he ambushes Grady in his room, convincing him to watch him if something goes awry when he sleeps. Grady switches off before Jesse is awoken, feeling a bit full. We then go on to see Mark Shostrom's brilliant effects work in a Jesse to Freddy transformation scene, consisting of several separate effects gags that took weeks to film and 11 weeks to build, eventually ending in a slimy Freddy crawling out of Jesse's torso. And at one point, Shostrom himself stood in as Freddy's hand, and that eye coming out of Jesse's mouth? Well, that's Kevin Yeager's then girlfriend. Grady freaks out, calling for his parents as Frederick greets him with a rotten old smile. Grady's parents try to get to him. Oh, hello, Ferris Bueller's dad. But it's too late. Freddy pins Grady up against his door before slicing him through the torso, with the blades making their way all the way through the door. With Grady now dead, we see a bloody Jesse looking at his handiwork before giving himself 7 years bad luck. Jesse bails back to Lisa's place, who clearly isn't bothered by her bloodied up beau. All the while, things start heating up outside at the party, but things are getting a lot more interesting inside. J-Dog starts having another attack, but this time it's too late. Freddy finally makes his way out into the real world, attacking Lisa and literally becoming a little ankle biter and chucking a tanty like a toddler. Nah. Also, how fucking creepy and badass is this shot? God, I love that makeup. And yep, that's the same stunt mask from the shower scene, a stunt double for Lisa, and of course Freddy. Minus his finger blades. Safety. Lisa grabs a knife as Freddy or Jesse... Fressy? We also get a good look at the more organic hand claw, and this was the only one made by Kevin Yeager, who still has it to this very day. Crispy. Lisa takes a stab at defusing the situation, but it's not enough. Freddy makes his way out of the party with a smashing success, and quite the entrance. Now, the pool party scene is one for contention. Some people love it, some people hate it. Personally, I love it. Except for the fact that there's a bunch of burly teens that could totally take down Freddy. Yes, it's technically breaking the rules of the Wes Craven Bible, but at the same time, to see Freddy wailing on a bunch of teens, yes, absolutely, I want to see that. But if you're being chased by a burnt man with blades coming out of his hand and poor footwear taste, I'd run too. Freddy goes absolutely ballistic on these kids, complete with face slashes, gut punches, and even at one point, a counseling session gone wrong.
I'm here to help you. Yourself, fucker!
Lisa's dad runs out and fires a warning shot at some chips, leading to the greatest fucking shot in this film. Look at him! Look at that makeup and those teeth! Freddy realizes he's no longer the life of the party and sees himself off the premises. Now, Lisa knows exactly where to go and follows Freddy to an old power plant to confront the burnt one once and for all. When Lisa arrives at Kruger's old stomping ground, she's greeted with... two of the strangest choices I've seen in these films. What you see here are indeed two real dogs with latex masks slapped on top of one another. Some people have said it's the previous victims of Freddy. I say this is just a case of, yeah, we got nothing. Lisa falls through a catwalk where you can see her preamp the gag, but then she's finally met by Freddy, cornering her before Lisa weakens Freddy by one thing and one thing alone.
That's the power of love. Love? Who's been screwing with this thing?
Freddy erupts into flames, showcasing an amazing puppet built by Kevin Yeager that was made from wax. The crew then hit it with hair dryers as it melted in real time. This behind the scenes shot of Freddy's arm on fire performed by a stuntman is pretty neat too. And when the flames die down and the smoke clears, all that's left is a charred shell that begins moving it. Oh, it's just Jesse. Hey man, we missed you. We then cut to Jesse and his mum, who's all bandaged up and must have one hell of a plastic surgeon. It must be this guy. Okay, so do Mr. and Mrs. Walsh know exactly what happened now? Like, do they know about Freddy? And if so, do they... Who the fuck cares? As Jesse does a little zoomy, he hops on the bus and is greeted by Lisa and Carrie. And Jesse's PTSD kicks in as the bus speeds up and yells at the driver, but just ends up looking like a silly Billy. Just when things are back to normal, Freddy's hand comes through Carrie and the bus takes them back on a tour of the desert, with the credits then rolling to Did You See a Dream Walking? Freddy's Revenge hit theaters on the 1st of November 1985, just shy of a year of the first film's release. Now with a budget of $3 million, it went on to gross over $30 million worldwide. Critics and fans weren't too kind to the film upon its initial release, but over the years it's garnered a cult following and I for one love this film. It's aged like a fine wine and marches to the beat of its own drum. And as for the homoerotic undertones, I think it's fine. It helps with giving the film its own identity. The characters are well-rounded and compassionate, as well as Robert Englund giving us a dark and mean performance as Freddy. Paired with Kevin Yeager's wonderful prosthetic makeup design, now Freddy had officially become a smash hit all over the world. It was now time for him to enter into his MTV phase. Not only smashing box office records, but heads into TVs. But that'll have to wait until the next installment of Behind the Reel when we look at A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. Thank you so much for watching, guys. A massive thank you to the delightful Mark Patton for doing that intro for me. It meant the world. Love you guts, and I'll catch you in the next one.